Is all yours, Marty.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it. My name is Marty Glom, and we're going to talk a little bit today about Paintin Pepe. Let's see here. So Pepe, 1955 Kenworth butterfly hood conventional that you've had a lot of fun with over the years and hope to have a whole lot more. So that's me on the right. That's Pepe on the left. Thanks to ATHS for the opportunity. Thanks to all of you that are members for your support, your membership. Appreciate y'all so much. And thanks for joining us at this virtual 2020 convention. It's a pretty cool deal. I'm amazed. I really am. We owe huge thank you to the staff there in Kansas City. They just did a hell of a job. So that's Pepe before. That was a picture. I heard about the truck, friend of a friend of a friend. That was a picture that was sent to me. And that's kind of where we started. And that's kind of where we ended up. They're the latest rendition of Pepe. I'll make a couple disclaimers this morning. I'm certainly no expert. Pretty much self-taught. I've learned by trial and error. Kind of in the position of couldn't afford to pay anybody to do it, so I had to learn how to do it myself. So again, I'm certainly no expert. I'm just going to share with you all today what has worked well for me, some watch outs that I know about, some things that you really need to do, but it's always a learning experience. One of my grandpa's famous sayings, he left me with so many cool things like that. Experience is what you get when it doesn't turn out the way you thought it would or the way you thought it should. So we've got a fair amount of experience based on that definition. And this is not a product commercial for Axalta, formerly DuPont. Those are the materials that I use. That's the material that I've always used, and it's what I get along the best with, so I stick with it. But there are tons of other suppliers, manufacturers out there, PPG, a real good partner of the societies for a long time. But what we're going to talk about today again is Axalta products, because that's what I'm most familiar with. So we're going to talk a little bit about refinish systems. All of the materials that go together, some that don't go together. You really do need to follow the instructions, and we'll talk more about that. And we're going to talk about the process today in an overall or a complete refinish situation. Talk about any spot repairs or trying to blend color or matching colors. Those are just like, those are three entirely different worlds than doing an overall or a complete refinish. So that's the perspective that we'll be looking at it in today. So there's lots of material out there, lots of information out there, lots of reading that we need to do, research that we need to do, and homework. One thing that I really do want to stress is to follow that process, that whoever system you're using, be it Axalta, PPG, Sherwin-Williams, AkzoNobel, whoever it is, follow the process. Use the materials that they instruct you to use. Don't try and, I would suggest to you that you not try and cut any corners. It usually will come back to haunt you. We're doing this as a hobbyist, right? This is fun. We're not in a production environment. I don't care if the thing is in the paint booth for 2 days or 2 weeks. It don't matter, right? So don't try and cut any corners. follow the steps. And hey, I'm just like everybody else. I usually only read the instructions when it doesn't work. But we really do need to take a different approach when we're talking about the refinish process here, and we do need to read the instructions and we need to follow them. And we'll dive into that pretty deep here in just a little bit. So I prefer to start with bare aluminum or bare steel. You can get into so much trouble with old paint, old bodywork. I really like to start with something bare. If it's an aluminum substrate, a zinc-rich self-etching primer like this is really a mandatory step. There's maybe one other alternative, and that's an epoxy primer. But again, I have the best luck with the self-etching primer. It's a two-part material. It lays down nice. If you're doing small parts, indiscreet parts that don't show a lot, like brackets and things like that, you can put this VeriPrime product on it. Let it set for about 30 minutes and put color right over the top of it without touching it, and man, it sticks like iron. It really works good for that. Again, if it's an aluminum substrate, you really need something that is rich in zinc, something that is self-etching to stop that aluminum from trying to heal itself as soon as it's exposed to moisture or to the atmosphere. So, aluminum that sits around a while kind of gets that white film over it. That's what it tries to do the second that it is exposed to the atmosphere. And if you don't stop that process, you can really have some adhesion problems. This product works super for that. The next thing that we'll talk about is a primer filler. This is what they call a 2K product. So it's got an activator. It's a chemical process. The product and the activator chemically link together to cure. I would suggest that you use a 2K primer to go over all your body work and to block on, as opposed to a single stage, because that chemical cure process really minimizes the chance for sand scratch swelling and things like that. So 2K primer filler. And then before we paint, I always try and use a sealer. Even though I know I've stripped it to bare metal or bare aluminum, I know exactly what's under it. There are certainly advantages to using a sealer under the base coat or under the color if you're doing a single stage refinish. It almost totally eliminates the possibility of something underneath coming to the surface, maybe some solvents or something that haven't totally evaporated around the edge of where you might have done some body work or something like that. Sometimes you can get some problems there, some checking in the paint. And it provides a very flat, uniform substrate or base to apply your color on. Excellent holdout, and a big step. It will save you, in most instances, it will save you color. It helps the color hide better and allows it to be more even. There's a certain amount of each of these products that we want to apply. More is not always better. We'll talk about that too a little bit in our film thicknesses and how we build the finish up. I would strongly suggest to you that you use a sealer. And the closer, now I should practice what I preach, but the closer to the finish color that your sealer is, the less color you will use, because it just simply covers easier and hides better. So if you're painting white, you probably want to use a white or a very light gray sealer. If you're painting black, you probably want to use a black sealer. This product that Axalta makes here has 7 value shades, so you can hit it anywhere there in the middle of that. Top coats in a single stage process. So not base coat, clear coat, just single stage, one stage, color and the clear all together. I'm sure that most of you have heard the name Emron. It's a polyurethane product. It can be applied in a single stage. You know, it's the best stuff that ever was. I've painted a lot of Emron. The older product, the 5.0 pound per gallon VOC Emron, I mean, that was the best stuff that was ever made. It was bulletproof. You could put brake fluid on it, battery acid on it. It didn't matter. It's what I painted the frame in the 55 with. That paint's now 15, 16 years old. It still looks just as good as it did the day I sprayed it. But with the rules that have come into play and the restrictions on the amount of VOCs that we can put into the atmosphere, this product now is down to 3.5 pounds per gallon. And they simply took some of the good stuff out of it. It's not as good as it used to be, but I guess you could maybe say that about all of us, right? Anyway, so Emron, fantastic product, really expensive. So Axalta has come up with another polyurethane product called Rival. It's very, very close to Emron. It's the same chemical composition, and it's about half the cost. I used Rival in several places on Pepe, where I did just a single stage refinish, didn't do base clear. Tell you, the stuff sprays nice, it lays down nice, it's got excellent gloss, it's a good hider, covers well, and again, about half the price of real live Emron. So if you're thinking that way, it's a great way to go. So there are some of the places that I did use the single stage process: inside the cab, the bottom of the cab, firewall, bottom side of the hood, and that's Rival that I sprayed on all those areas right there. Stuff's really nice. It sprays really nice. The exterior of Pepe is 2-stage, a base coat, clear coat. And I did use a solvent-borne base coat. I used the Chroma Premier line for Pepe. Very tempted to try waterborne. Since I painted Pepe, I've sprayed a lot of waterborne base coat. And I'll tell you, it's some amazing stuff. Standox, which is a division of Axalta, makes a waterborne base coat called Stando Blue. It is a coat and a half, wet on wet. And then you go in the booth, or you spray the color on it one time, a coat and a half at one time, let it flash, put the clear on it, you're done. Super productive. Color match with water is so much easier to achieve. The colors are more pure. Metallics orient better. Water's cool stuff. So if you're thinking about painting something, you might give it some thought. I use solvent based just because water was pretty new when I was doing Pepe, and I had no experience with it and not something that I wanted to gamble on. The clear coat that I used is this Chroma Premier 72500. It's their glamour clear, for lack of a better term. It is truly crystal clear. It's like looking in a glass of water. It sprays nice. It lays down nice. It's pretty easy to get on it and buff it if you need to. The only thing that I don't like about it is it's not as tough as I had hoped it would be. it's kind of touchy. Wash the thing with the dirty mitt, or go to a truck wash and they jump on there with the broom. You get some scratches in the clear, you know, or with the brush. You're going to get some scratches in the clear. All you got to do is sand it, or, you know, worst case, sand it with 3,000 or 5,000 and buff it back, or jump on it with the buffer. It comes right back. But it's a little bit hard to care for. It's not intended for, certainly not intended for everyday use on a truck that's going to be out there working. It's okay on Pepe. It's just a toy. It's been painted, I don't know, 7-8 years now, I guess, or something like that. I've buffed it a couple of times, but stuff sprays nice and is really, really cool to work with. So that homework that we talked about a little bit earlier, and doing some reading and some research, all manufacturers that I'm aware of produce something to the equivalent of a technical data sheet for every product that they make. And there's all kinds of information in those technical data sheets, product data sheets, whatever that manufacturer calls them. So let's take a dive in here a little bit and look at the technical data sheet, or TDS, for this clear coat product that I used on Pepe. So tons of information in there. It tells you what components you can use with it, with respect to activators and reducers. It tells you the temperature range that you should use for selection of the reducer, and the process that you're trying to accomplish, whether it be a spot repair, whether you're doing multiple panels, like 2 or 3 panels down the side, or an overall refinish, and what the temperature range is. You want to pay particular attention to that temperature range and the reducer that you use. If you use a low temp reducer, let's say something in that 65-degree range there, and it's 100 degrees in the paint booth, you're probably going to get some runs, because that slower reducer delays the process that those solvents evaporate from the product that you're spraying. Conversely, you use a 95 temp reducer in a 65-degree environment, the stuff's going to flash so fast it won't flow, probably. So pay attention to those products that are compatible and the temperature range that you should use them in. Mix ratios and viscosities. If you're mixing your paint, you're lucky enough to have a gram scale, ultimately that's the way to go. But you can certainly use a graduated cup. Here, 2 to 1 to 10% the mix ratio on this particular product. And we also see down here in the bottom left, you can measure the viscosity with a Zahn cup, number 2 Zahn cup. That's a viscosity meter. It's a little cup about that tall, about that big around, hole in the bottom of it. Dip it in the paint, get your stopwatch, pull the Zahn cup out. As soon as it starts to drip, hit the stopwatch. As soon as it stops a steady flow, stop the stopwatch. And if mixed properly for this product, that should take somewhere between 15 and 17 seconds. Again, if you're using a graduated cup or something and you do it 2 to 1 to 10%, you pay attention to what you're doing, you'll have absolutely no trouble mixing it that way. Accelerators, you can accelerate it. Again, we're not in a production environment. If it takes a half hour to flash instead of 15 minutes, I really don't care. In fact, I'm probably ready to sit down for a little bit, and 30 minutes is just fine. I would not suggest the use of fisheye eliminator. Fisheyes are paint imperfections that we get from an old substrate underneath. That's one reason I like to strip it. Eliminates the possibility of that. Maybe some incompatible materials, or some wax and grease, some foreign substance there that might be on the surface. Fisheye eliminator will negate that. it is silicone. And once you start using it, you've got to use it in everything, because if you, even a little bit of overspray, if you cut it in, sprayed a jam without using fisheye eliminator, got a little overspray on the outside, I'm going right back to the outside with the color. I put fisheye band in my color. Wherever that stuff with fisheye band hits the stuff that doesn't have fisheye band, guess what? Going to have fish eyes. And there is no way to get rid of them except strip it. So I can't stress cleanliness enough. Even the oil off of your skin can cause trouble. So a couple solutions to that: wear gloves, which is what you should probably do. Again, I'm not real good at practicing what I preach. Wash your hands a lot, which we're damn well familiar with at this point in time. And before you get on it every time, just wipe it down with wax and grease remover. It doesn't hurt a thing. Again, the substrate. So this is what we can spray this particular clear coat product over. TDS tells us that. Surface preparation. Allow the base coat to dry 15 to 30 minutes prior to putting clear on it. Okay. Sometimes we need to extend that when we're in cooler shop conditions, or we're painting in our garage, not in a heated booth or a climate controlled booth. Sometimes we need to extend those base coats or flash times a little bit. And it's not a problem. More time is better than rushing it. If you rush it, there's a good chance that you're going to trap some of those solvents in whatever's underneath it, and you're going to get some lifting problems or some paint imperfections. Most of these products, in reality, if you can apply over them in 24 hours or something less than 24 hours without even sanding them. The products stay open that long. You'll have no problems with adhesion. I've even cheated that a little bit from time to time and got away with it. I wouldn't recommend it, but let the flash times go by. And if you need to add a little time there, I would suggest that as opposed to rushing it. How to set up your gun. So, and we'll talk a little bit about paint guns here in a couple minutes, but whether we have a compliant gun or just an HVLP gun, the needle size 1.3 to 1.4 millimeters, all the same. And the air pressures that we should spray at, again, those pressures are in the perfect condition with the perfect painter. You can change so much in the application of a product with your distance from the panel, or how slow or how fast you go, how much overlap you use when you're applying the product. At the end of the day, you really just have to watch what the paint is doing. If it's dry looking, slow down a little bit, get a little closer to the panel, or both. The recommended distance for most paint guns today with the 1.3 or 1.4 tip in them is 8 to 10 inches, and that's about from your thumb to your finger. You need to be about that far off the panel, and travel at a rate where you can apply a medium wet coat, whatever that is. That's not defined anywhere that I know of, but it's not super shiny, but it's not real dry and popcorn looking, nice, somewhere in the middle. So here we go. Apply 2 medium wet coats. Let it flash 12 to 15 minutes between those coats. Proper tip size and air pressure is important. Sure it is. Again, we may need to increase that flash time between the coats when we're air drying. Again, most of these products are intended for a body shop, and they're in a paint booth, and they can turn the heat on in there, and they can bake that thing at 140, 145 degrees for 10 minutes, and that is pretty close to 24 hours in an air dry situation. So us doing it at home, don't push flash times, okay? Dries very slowly when we're using that 14306 activator, which is not recommended for an air dry situation. It's only recommended if you're in a heated booth. Takes care of dummies like me that don't read very well the first time. So recoatability tells us here, can be recoated during any stage of dry or cure. If it's more than 24 hours, you need to scuff it, something very lightly. A gold colored Scotch-Brite pad, which is roughly the equivalent of 1200 grit, works really, really good. There's some guys out there that are putting down a couple of coats of clear, sanding it with 800 to get the texture out of it, reapplying the clear, and not color sanding it and buffing it, and getting some pretty good results with that. So that may be another way to do it. But if more than 24 hours, you do need to break that surface, get a little bit of mechanical and chemical bond back in. So how much paint do we put on? More is not always better. In a base coat, clear coat, or a two-stage process, we need to be about 6 to 8 mils total thickness. Mil is about 1/1000th of an inch. The most critical element here is, well, they're all important. We want to make sure that we got enough color on that we can hide that we truly have good coverage. And we want to have enough clear coat on there so that we can protect the paint. Uncatalyzed base coat or base coat with no clear over the top of it, there's no UV inhibitors in it. There's nothing in it protect it from the elements. That's all done through the clear coat. And our target for that clear coat's about 2 mils in thickness. So I would suggest to you that if you're anticipating sanding it and buffing it, probably going to want to do 3 coats of clear. Get a little extra material on there because you're going to take some off when you sand it. And ideally, we should end up around that 2 mil thickness with our clear coat. And you can buy cheap mil gauge. They're all over Amazon, eBay, whatever. It's just a magnet. Doesn't work real good on aluminum, right? That takes a $500 tool. But on steel, it's just a magnet, and you pull it back off, and the resistance to that pull tells you how thick the mils are. If you're working with aluminum, you need to have an electronic one, and it's expensive. So paint guns. My favorite paint gun right there, Binks Model 7. Golly, I sprayed thousands of gallons of paint probably with the Binks Model 7, and got some really good paint jobs with it, but it's horribly inefficient. It's not legal for commercial refinishers. I mean, we can do whatever we need to do at home, but I would suggest to you that you get an HVLP gun or a high volume, low pressure paint gun that is gravity fed as opposed to siphon fed. We'll talk about these here. So I have 3 guns. I have one for primer, one for color, one for clear. You can probably do everything that you need to do with one gun. There are pluses and minuses to having multiples. I just like to try and do it as best I can, and I need all the help I can get. So if I can gain a little benefit from a different paint gun, I'm probably going to try it. It's a gun I use for primer. It does have a bigger tip in it. It's got a 1.7 millimeter tip. Lets you apply a little more product than a normal paint gun. This is a gun I use for color. It's old. That's probably, I mean, it's obsolete. It's a 15-year-old paint gun, but it works good. I'm used to it. I know how I need to use it to get the finish that I'm looking for. And I'm not real crazy about experimenting, so I stick with it. It's a DeVilbiss GT40. This is a gun I use for clear. It's an Iwata gun. It also has a 1.4 nozzle in it. But Iwata has done a lot of research and a lot of testing. That gun is truly only made for clear coat. The thing throws a fan about 2 feet wide. It atomizes the paint really, really well into really tiny droplets, which lets it lay down better, flow better. It's a hell of a clear coat gun, but it's $1,000. So, y'all decide what you need to do there. Anyway, HVLP guns, really way, way more efficient. So our Binks Model 7 back here, our antique, that gun transferred, on a good day, transferred 40% of the material that came out of the nozzle to the surface that I was painting. So where did 60% of it go? Into the air, right? Into the atmosphere. So part of these laws, and the national rule is actually what it's called, saying that any product we spray in quantities of more than 2 ounces, I believe, can't consist of more than 3.5 pounds per gallon volatile organic compound. And those volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, are the solvents that are put into the paint that allow you to transfer it from the gun to the panel. This clear coat gun is about 75% efficient. So 75% of the material that comes out of the nozzle actually gets to the panel where I want it to go. This gun, my DeVilbiss T240, it's about 65% efficient. And the biggest advantage to having those higher efficiency guns is you use way less material. And I thought my days of sticker shock were gone until I go to the paint store and I got this little bit cardboard box that I carry out of there for $500 or $600. Man, that stuff is horribly expensive. So if I can get twice as much material out of the gun onto the panel I'm painting, that probably means I'm going to use half as much product, and you can easily pay for another paint gun doing that in not too long a time. So those transfer efficiency rates are important, and that thing lays down paint way better than that Model 7 ever did. So HVLP gun's worth the investment. Here's a little bit about Pepe. Here's the chassis prep that we did. Pepe is all aluminum except for the front fenders. So we had it blasted with walnut shells. You can see the green stuff there on the right. That's that zinc self-etching primer that I used. Painted the frame with Emeron single stage. Did it in 2 steps. Painted the inside first and then the outside. Just too much to keep up with, trying to do both at one time. Excuse me. And when I say keep up, when we're spraying, we always want to spray onto a wet edge or a wet bed so that we don't get those dry lines where we stop and where we start. I didn't think I could keep up with it doing the inside and the outside, so I did the inside first, cross members first, masked it off, and then did the outside so that I could stay wet on wet as I went with the finish, and it came out okay. There we are, all painted. Rolling chassis, that was pretty cool. Got to push it out in the daylight for the first time there. Motor, transmission, cross members, front suspension in it there, and so forth. Carrying on with the build. Again, the cab's all aluminum. I chemically stripped it. I did not have it blasted. You have to be really careful with blasting aluminum. You can, blast in anything really. Somebody that's not experienced, a little too much pressure, wrong media, you can destroy an aluminum cab in a heartbeat. So I just stripped it chemically. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, it's messy. Yeah, it's hard on your hands, even with gloves on, but that's the way I wanted to go. That's the way we did it. So we're bare aluminum there. We've got our self-etching primer as the very first part on the bare aluminum. Then our build primer over that, block sanding it each time to try and get it straight, get all the imperfections out. Looks like we got the doors hung on it there and everything. Looks like it's about ready to go. The doors were absolute junk, really busted up around where the latch area was and so forth. So I took the skins off of them, rebuilt all the inner structure, riveted everything back together, actually made a lower door skin for the right door, passenger door. Front fenders, pretty much same deal. Looked, never could find anything better than what I had. Truck originally came with a 180 horse Cummins in it. Somewhere along the line, it got a 220 in it. And then somewhere along the line, somebody turbocharged that 220 and made it into a 262. And the only way to do that without changing the exhaust manifold is to cut a big hole in the right fender apron. So this area over here where all those livers are at. But they did a really good job. After they cut that one out with an axe, I think, they brazed a coffee can in there. So on the right side, and the left one was all busted up. So I did find a couple of those inner aprons that were better than the ones that I had. Cut the fenders apart, put those inner aprons in, and then fabricated some pieces there in the middle, as you can see. Pretty much all metal finished over there on the left and ready to start the bodywork. I had to laugh at myself, and I remembered plain as day, there was a spot in the left front fender out there in the middle that was kind of high. So I get out my dolly and my shrinking hammer, and I'm pounding on the thing with the shrinking hammer, trying to shrink that metal or take that low spot down. And it finally dawns on me, you're not working on a 2000 Honda here where that front fender is like a piece of paper. These fenders are made out of real steel. Got out my torch, heated that baby up, cold towel, shrunk it down, hammered and dollied it. I was done in 5 minutes. I was eye-opening. Forgot the old tricks there for a little bit. So on the right, you can see that we're starting with the bodywork. Yeah, I covered the thing with Bondo, polyester filler. Nothing wrong with Bondo. Everybody's new car's got Bondo in it. As long as you prep it right and you don't put it in 2 inches thick, there's no problem. Rule of thumb there, and I think most manufacturers say this, apply it 1/8 of an inch or less, and there's absolutely no problem with it. So that's what I do. It helps get the panel straight. It will show you high and low spots real quick. So if there's low areas that you need to raise up with a hammer and dolly, you can surely do that. If there are high areas that you need to peck down with a hammer and dolly, you can surely do that. That's just the way I do it. If y'all want to sit there and metal finish it, more power to you. Could I? Maybe, but it takes forever. I really like this Evercoat Rage Extreme product. Works good. It doesn't shrink. If you mix it properly, you get minimal pinholes. Pinholes are just something that's real inherent to polyester filler when you're mixing it. If you get air entrapped in there, little bubbles of air entrapped in the Bondo, and you put the Bondo on, you sand it, then you got a little pinhole in there, and you got to fill that. And it takes about 20 coat of primer to fill a pinhole in Bondo, so usually put some more Bondo back over it. This stuff, it's really good. It's light, and it minimizes the chance for those pinholes. So I work everything first time with 36 grit. It's kind of like pea gravel stuck on a piece of sandpaper. And use a long board, like you can see here, a big flat sanding board. I have one that's about 30 inches long that's flexible. It'll bend around the corners of the fender up there. With 36 grit on it, it's pretty productive, pretty fast. and it really allows you to get it straight. And if still, it'll show those highs and lows to you in a real hurry. So knock it down with 36 grit, make sure the panel's straight, and then go from there. Really suggest not sanding with your hand. Use a block whenever you can. The bigger, the better. The bigger surface you can get out there, the better chance you're going to have of keeping that panel flat and straight. And here's an example. 3M here makes all different kinds of shapes. You can get in nooks and crannies and radiuses and inside curves and outside curves and all that stuff. I have wood dowels, connecting rod wrist pins, pieces of pipe, all kinds of stuff. These work really good too. So after in between, of course, we sand with 36, we prime it. We sand it next with 80 grit, prime it. And in between each one of those, we want to use a product called Guide Coat. And that's that black looking stuff over here that I've sprayed on over the primer. Guide Coat, some call it low spot finder or whatever, comes in two forms. It's in an aerosol can here, or it's in a powder. And you want to use a contrasting color. So I'm using a real light, that beige colored primer. I use black Guide Coat. If you're using a dark gray or a black primer, then you want to use like a silver Guide Coat. And what happens when you block it and it's flat, you'll take all that Guide Coat off, but if there's a low spot, it'll stay black, or the contrasting color. So it helps you find those low spots that you can't see and maybe can't feel quite as easily when you're blocking stuff. Huge help. Some of y'all may be wondering what that piece of tape is for, that piece of green tape running down the middle of the fender. Another little trick I learned along the way, of course, there's a body line there in the middle of that fender. If you have a sharp body line like that, it's a pretty good trick to keep that body line straight. So I'm going to sand the left side or the outside of that fender. I put my tape on the right side of the body line and I sand up to the tape. That tape will keep that body line perfectly straight down the middle of that panel. So I take that tape off, put my tape on the left side up to the body line where I've just sanded, and block sand the right side up to the tape. And again, keeping that body line really straight all the way around that fender. It makes it really sharp. So if your body line is sharp, then you're where you need to be. If your body line is slightly rounded or has a little bit of a contour to it, you can knock that down real easy with, like, a Scotch-Brite pad or a piece of 600 paper or something like that. But it really helps you keep those body lines straight in the panels. So I think we blocked it with 36. We primed it. We Guide Coated it. Now we're going to sand it with 80 grit. The rule of thumb for stepping up your sandpaper is never more than double what you're using. So the first one was 36 grit. 2 times that is 72. They don't make it. 80 grit's next. That's what I'm going with. So I'm going to block it with 80 grit this time. Guide Coat it. Prime it. Next, I'm going to sand it with 220. But hey, dummy, you just said don't step more than twice. Well, yeah, that's true. But this will work just fine. I do start 220 wet. Makes the paper last a lot longer. It's a little bit easier to sand. And always, using the block. Prime it, Guide Coat it, sand it with 400 wet. Prime it, Guide Coat it, block it, sand it with 600 wet. Most say that 400 or finer is okay to put under your base coat. I don't know. I'm just anal. I hate sand scratches that show after I've worked my butt off on the thing. Sand it with 600 the last time. you get plenty of mechanical adhesion, and you'll get rid of, or you'll certainly reduce the chances for that sand scratch swellings and things like that. And my rule of thumb, when is it good enough? Well, only you can be the judge of that. When I think it's good enough, I usually do it one more time, and it's pretty close to being where it needs to be. So there's the front fenders, final coat of primer. They are about ready for paint. The hood looked long and hard for a hood. I got 3 or 4 of them out there. Could never find anything better than what I had. I ended up making it. I made all 5 pieces there, the 2 sides, the 2 tops, and that center strip. Got out the English wheel, then started making scrap aluminum pieces. It's been a long time since I'd used it. The most difficult part about it was the radius at the front of the hood top is different than the radius at the rear of the hood top. It's 8 inches at the front, 10 inches at the rear. Trying to get that in a gradual progression was difficult. Got lots of scrap aluminum, but I finally figured it out. The other difficult part on the sides was that rolled wire bead edge. Thought I could do that with my bead roller. Wrong. Ended up doing that with a hammer and dolly, finally closing it up with a hammer and dolly over those radius areas over the wheel well. But spent about a year making the hood parts, but came out pretty good. Was worth it. And there's our first test drive, the maiden voyage for Pepe. We got our 5-gallon can there on the side. We got our batteries back there on the frame rails. Absolutely had to go for a ride sitting on a 5-gallon bucket. My grandson's in there with me. You can't see him over there. Left the yard, went down the end of the road there, made a right turn. My bucket fell over. Just about fell out of the truck, grabbing for steering wheel and shifters and all that good stuff. And you just thought it was funnier. Anyway, there we go on our first test drive. Almost ready for paint. So it's completely together for the most part together. All the panels are on, all the panels fit. Everything's pretty straight. I'm going to put some stripes on it. So I lay them out, take measurements so that I can duplicate that. I absolutely hate masking things. I hate overspray. I'd much rather take something apart and paint it a piece at a time than I would spending a couple of days masking it and still have to clean up overspray in little places where it blew out under the tape and this, that, and the other stuff. So y'all there's nothing wrong with painting things together. It's way easier. If you have good luck at it, cool, go for it. I never did. So we got all our dimensions here so we can duplicate our stripes, take it all back apart. We're in the booth, ready to paint, all masked up. Sealer, gotta have sealer. So again, I should practice what I preach. The truck's white and black, right? Well, how come you got black sealer? You said that you had those 7 value shades down there and you wanted to use as close to the color that you're going to finish with as you could. True, but the best way to get really black is to put it over a black primer or black sealer. So I chose to seal the whole thing black so that my black roof and stripes and stuff were really, really black, and use a little more white to get good coverage. So that's what we did. The sealer's on it. It's ready to apply the base coat. There's the base coat. Again, it's a 2-stage process. You can't tell the base coat from the color coat, really, but that is black color, the base coat. Mask up the roof and the stripes, things that we want to stay black. Spray the white base coat and put clear over it. Very fortunate to be able to use that booth. I was able to rent it from a guy that I know. Really lucky to do that. Can you do this in your garage? Yeah, you can. Are you going to get some dirt in it? Yeah, I got dirt in it in the booth. We get dirt in the booth every day in everybody's shop. So it's just how much. You're going to get more dirt at home than you are in a booth, but you can sure do it. Stuff laid down pretty good. Got lucky. All the panels. So what do we do to finish it up? We want to denib and polish, take out our little dirt specks as much as we can. You don't have to sand it and polish it, but if you want to, again, the technical data sheet for the clear coat, because that's the product that we're working on, tells us how to do it. So we want to sand a 1500 or finer and use a foam pad to sand it the very first time. Honestly, if it's got much texture in it at all, I've got 3 coats of clear on it because I know I'm going to sand it and buff it. Probably going to start with 800, get all the texture out of it with 800, and then step up, and we'll follow that process here. 800 or 1,000 to start, then 1,500, then 3,000, then 5,000. And by the time you get to 3,000, it's good that they put 3M and the grid on one side of those discs because you can't tell which side of the disc to use. It's so fine. You definitely want to do this with water. And if you take just a little bit of Dawn dish soap, put 3 or 4 drops of that in your bucket of water, it will help keep the paper a little bit cleaner because we're back on our clear coat about 24 hours after we've sprayed it. It'll help the sandpaper stay clean. It'll keep it from biting in and kind of skipping. I may make some marks in it, even though I'm using a block, a soft pad or something. It just works really good. So put a little Dawn in there. Again, 800, 1,500, 3,000, 5,000. You can quit at 3,000 if you want. It's just going to take a little bit longer to buff up. We want to do it fairly slow, 14 or 1,800 RPM on the buffer with the wool bonnet. Same thing when we get to the polish part and the foam pad. I really, really like this 3M Perfected system. It's 3 steps. They made it just for me. It's got number 1, first step, number 2, second step, number 3, third step. Number 1, the circle is white. I use a white pad. Number 2, the circle's black. I use a black pad. Number 3 is blue, and I use a blue pad. It's just, man, this stuff really, really works good. Man, it will make your black come alive. Black's such a horrible color. Of course, when you sand it, polish it, buffing compound and all that stuff goes everywhere. Easiest way to clean that up is with a product like this Quick Detail and a microfiber towel. It'll actually, I mean, you can wash it, you can rub it, you can do all kinds of stuff with soap and water. Compound is hard to get off, hard to get out of nooks and crannies. Quick Detail works really, really good for that, cleaning up that residue. So there's a finished product, the left front fender. Just really, really happy with the way it turned out. I got lucky, rather be lucky than good any day. Pepe's getting close there. Our very first trip, the convention in Springfield, 2014, left the house, I had 127 miles on the odometer. What the heck, right? Let her fly. Since then, been east to west in it, a little bit of north to south. Just had a blast with it. Just really, really fortunate. Got lucky at GATS a couple of times. Actually, we're fortunate enough to win our class in 2018, 2019. So thank you all for listening. Sorry I talked so much. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. I'm wide open.
All right. I do have one, and I think it's probably has answered your question once they saw the pictures, but they were like, how did you come up with the name Pepe?
Long story. So Pepe, of course, black and white. Pepe Le Pew, the skunk, and he just kind of bounces all over the place. So that's how we came up with Pepe. I think Geo Quaylar lovingly named him Pepe, and it stuck.
Oh, good old Geo. Does anybody else have any questions, any comments? You can raise your hand. Oh, how did you cut the fender pieces out?
Die grinder. On the flat surfaces, I just used a die grinder, cut it out. Those inner aprons, I took a spot weld cutter, cut them out of the old fenders. That way I could, when I put them back, I could just plug weld those where the spot weld used to be. Looks almost factory.
And have you ever tried Wizard's polish?
I have not.
Stephen, if you want to talk, you can talk about that. All right, any other questions? Oh, there we go. What activator would you use if not using a paint booth?
If not using a
A
booth?
paint booth. Mhm.
Yeah, just make sure you use something that's not intended for something that needs to be baked. And just ask the supplier, your finish master, probably the most prominent one around the country. Just tell them, hey, I'm in an air dry situation. I don't have a booth. Which activator should I use? Making sure you pay attention to what temperature it's going to be as well, because sometimes different products may have different activators as well as reducers for temperature.
All right.
Great question.
Yeah, Bill Donnelly asked, or was just saying his right fender was in a fire and need to repair the metal after its structure has changed.
Yeah, that's tough. Best advice I can give is if it's steel, sandblast it. That takes all those little molecules in the metal and spreads them all out, going all different directions again. It will bring as much integrity back to that part as possible.
Awesome. All right.
Prep it really well, hard to get paint to stick on something that's been burned. I've fixed a couple of vehicles that have been on fire, and man, it's tough. I don't know what it does. Nobody can tell me what it does. Just do all you can to get her to stick.
Maybe some of our guys with fire engines out there.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions as we wrap up here? Thank you, Marty.
Hey.
Love it. I've seen this a few times now, and I'm still learning things.
My pleasure. Truly my pleasure. There's my email address. There's my phone number. Do anything I can to help you all. Give me a shout. Be happy to do that anytime. Take a 30-minute break. Come back at 10:30. Watch Tony Martin, and he's going to be talking about the evolution of the W900s, and I cannot wait.
Yes, we're excited about that. Tony's awesome.
Cool.
So we will see you guys in a half an hour.
Thanks, Leanne. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Appreciate you. Bye.